Hello, dear students. Now we come to Lecture 4, the first part of Lecture 4, and the title of this lecture is Louis Althusser, a 20th century French Marxist philosopher. And of course, this is the Cultural Studies course of Level 7. You see from the dates of Louis Althusser, 1918-1990, that he was nearly a contemporary living during the same period as our two other founders of cultural studies, Richard Hoggart and Raymond Williams, nearly living at the same time, but this time we are talking about France. Louis Althusser was a staunch Marxist philosopher, and like all philosophers, they would accept the basic tenets of a certain school of philosophy, but then they would start to add their own contributions or sometimes modifications to this school. So when we say that Althusser is a Marxist, let's remember that Marxism always describes social formation, and social formation is another term for the structure of society. So according to Marxism, the structure of society or the social formation is always divided into two layers: the superstructure and the infrastructure. The superstructure, Marx and Engels say, is the structure made up of culture and ideology, according to Marx and Engels. And the infrastructure includes the economic base of society. And this economic base can be further divided into the forces of production, the means of production, and the relations of production. You see, Marxists are focused on this issue of production. Production, if you are producing goods, if you are a factory worker and this factory is making cars or clothes or shoes or whatever, if you are a farmer and you are producing agricultural crops, if you are a fisherman, you are producing fish through your fishing process. So the economy for Marxism is all about production. Even the production of services. Sometimes you don't produce goods, but you produce a certain service, like the healthcare service or whatever. So let's go back to the social formation or the structure of society according to Marxism. It is divided into a superstructure and an infrastructure. The superstructure is culture and ideology. The infrastructure is the economic base, and it is subdivided, this infrastructure, into three items that all relate to production. The first item of the infrastructure is the forces of production, which include the labor force, the workers themselves, and not just the workers. The training and the skill and the technical knowledge that they have, all this would be the labor force. The second item of infrastructure involves means of production, which is the raw materials, the tools, the machines that are used as means of production. And the third item of the infrastructure includes the relations of production, relations between workers and owners, between employers and employees, and so on. Now, we mentioned a term which is ideology while we were talking about the Marxist superstructure. We said it is made up of culture and ideology. Let us see the definition of ideology according to Marx and Engels. Marx and Engels Marx and Engels define ideology as the false consciousness, the false ideas, the false beliefs that are indoctrinated in the mind of the individual in order to mask the exploitative nature of relations of production. Of course, you can see that here you are talking about the individual within a society. And this individual supposedly has a certain consciousness. The individual, he or she, is conscious of his position in society, of the situation of this society, of his relations to others, of the role he is playing in the society or she is playing in the society. But Marx and Engels say that this consciousness is always false consciousness. It is not a true one because it has been indoctrinated, and you can notice the use of the passive voice, because how has this false consciousness been indoctrinated in the mind of the individual, or who is doing the indoctrination? Of course, the controlling elite of the society. The controlling elite are indoctrinating the individual. They are injecting the mind of the individual with certain ideas and beliefs, and the purpose of these ideas and beliefs is to try to hide or to mask the exploitative nature of the relations of production. They want this individual, who is supposedly a worker in a factory or any other job, not to notice that he or she is being exploited. They want him or her to believe that he is simply doing a job and receiving the fair salary for this job. They don't want the person, the individual, to start thinking about this exploitation or oppression that he is suffering or that she is suffering. So this is the definition of ideology according to Marx and Engels, that it is a false consciousness, ideas, beliefs indoctrinated in the minds of the individual to mask the exploitative nature of the relations of production. And as you remember, we just said that ideology is part of the superstructures, and the relations of production, in addition to the worker themselves, they are part of the infrastructure. So it is only logical that the superstructure controls the infrastructure in order to hide the exploitative nature of these relations of production. Now, Althusser is a Marxist. So, of course, he would believe that the social formation is always divided into a super and an infrastructure. He believes that. And he believes that the superstructure is the ideology and the culture, and that the infrastructure relates to the economic base, to the forces of production, the means of production, the relations of production. And he is familiar with the definition of ideology according to Marx and Engels, and he accepts all this theoretical information. But he made his own contribution. He developed or further elaborated this concept of ideology. And he also developed a related concept, which is the concept of hegemony. And he argues this development or this elaboration of the two concepts, ideology and hegemony, is in the form of an argument or a claim made by Althusser to the effect that if you say that the state is controlling the people, then you must remember that there are two types of state apparatus. So this is the contribution of Althusser, that ideology and hegemony, or in other words, the control of the people by the ruling class, it happens via or by means of two types of state apparatus, as follows. The first type of state apparatus would be called repressive state apparatus, and sometimes we refer to it just by initials, RSA, or repressive state apparatus. And the second type is called ideological state apparatus. Before defining and contrasting the two types, let us remember that they both work in order to achieve hegemony. They both work in order to achieve the control of the people or the masses or the workers by the state. They want to, these two apparatuses have the singular aim of controlling the people by means of the state itself. So they want to keep what we call the status quo. The status quo is the situation as it is. They don't want to have any change in the situation. They don't want to have any instability or revolution or any change. The two apparatuses have the same goal, but they achieve this goal by different purposes. The RSA, repressive state apparatus, and the ISA, or ideological state apparatus. Now let us talk about each of them. The repressive state apparatus refers to the means by which the governments control people through violence or coercion. Coercion, of course, is another word for violence. And this repressive state apparatus is usually constituted of the following institutions: the institution of the police, the institution of the military, the institution of the law, legal systems, judges, courts, and so on, and the prisons, of course. So police, military, law, prisons, these are the components or constituent parts of the apparatus that is called repressive state apparatus, and that controls the people or allows the governments to control the people by means of violence or coercion. Now, the second type of ideological state apparatus, according to Althusser, is an apparatus that allows the non-violent control of the government, of the people by the government. How do we have this non-violent control? By the indoctrination of the consciousness, the false consciousness that Marx and Engels talked about. And how do we do this indoctrination? Through a number of diverse social and cultural institutions that hide their symbolic violence. These institutions would include media, even the family, religion, sports, education, among other things. So as you see, the institutions that include media, education, family, religion, sports, they are violent, but in a symbolic way. They are not openly or overtly violent, and they hide their symbolic violence in order to achieve control by non-violent means. If you indoctrinate someone, if you put certain ideas in the mind of someone, if the family teaches the children that you have to be obedient and to be polite and to listen to your elders and whatever they tell you, you have to perform and you have to be a good citizen and you have to pray and to believe in religion and you have to respect the authorities. If your family teaches you this and then you hear almost the same message through the media and you hear it at school in your educational syllabus, and the syllabus itself is like organized to send this message, and then you have sports which is used as entertainment, but at the same time it is a means of control by giving catharsis or an outlet for the excessive feelings of the people so that they would have this outlet for their feelings instead of turning into riots or demonstrations or other means in order to get rid of these feelings. So all these things, they appear to be nice and harmless and non-violent, but Althusser reminded us that they are as controlling and they are as indoctrinating as the other openly violent apparatus. So when we mention Althusser, we remember his main contribution when he divided the methods of control, the methods of achieving hegemony and of indoctrinating ideology into two main apparatuses, the repressive one and the ideological one. He believes in the same social formation adopted by Marx and Engels, and he believes in the definition of ideology offered by Marx and Engels, but he develops and further discusses and analyzes how this control is achieved. Now we come to the end of this part of the lecture. Thank you and good luck.